All right,
Thank you.
we're going live on YouTube.
Okay. But we're still waiting for Mayor Pro Tem Vanel. We have 2 more minutes.
Sure. So mute on Zoom, but keep the camera on.
Yeah, the camera on you. And just make sure your microphone is on. Yeah, go
Okay, my internet's not working.
When you log on to Mill Creek Public,
Right.
check the box that I accept the terms and enter.
Yeah, we did. Sure. Was I did. You here to help? I'm very vaccinated. Just want you to know. Okay, don't you be afraid.
Vaccinated, but you buy it.
Here's Mayor Pro Tem Vanel. She's coming in now.
This is for the phone.
Member Briles is coming in.
Okay, starting momentarily, Councilmember Steckler is resolving some technical issues.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
All right. Hi, Councilmember Briles. I just wanted to check your mic. If you could just hold on one moment, I'm going to make you co-host. And you can unmute yourself now.
Hello, mic check, mic check.
Very good.
Sibilance.
Welcome. And did we check Mayor Pro Tem Vanel?
No, we didn't. Can you hear me?
Hi, welcome. Happy to see you.
Thanks.
2021 regular meeting of the Mill Creek City Council to order, and we'll begin with the pledge of allegiance. Councilmember Steckler will lead us tonight, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. For which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Naomi, roll call, please.
Mayor Holtzclaw,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Vanel,
Here.
Councilmember Bond,
Here.
Councilmember Cavallari,
Here.
Councilmember Steckler,
Here.
Councilmember Briles,
Here.
Councilmember Morgan.
Here.
Thank you, and again, once again, for the record, if you see us without our masks on, it's because Councilmember Morgan is 3 plexiglasses away and about 10 feet to one side, and Councilmember Steckler is another 3 plexiglass shields away, and we're all fully vaccinated, so. And the city manager is 20 feet and 1 piece of plexiglass. We will begin as usual with audience communication. Would anyone like to speak to the council tonight? Mr. Nelson, name and address, and please keep comments to 3 minutes. Can you unmute Mr. Nelson so we can hear his comments? You're
Are
unmuted.
you hearing me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
One comment. I think your DRCC presentation should include the evaluation of the Edmonds Performing Arts Center. It's the one center that is, or one community that is most like us of the ones I looked at on the presentation. It'd be appreciated if they could do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Would anyone else like to speak to the council tonight? Once, twice? We'll have another opportunity again at the end of the meeting. We will move.
Joe, can you unmute the chamber room?
An extra security measure, given what happened last week, so that no one can join until they've been unmuted. But we've given many of the leaders of tonight's meeting the privilege of self-editing and turning on and off their mutes. So we just need to address a technical matter that I believe we had addressed previously, but something's come up.
Okay, I think we're good to go now. Thank you.
Do you want me to go ahead?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, can everyone see my screen? Okay. So this is just going to be trends for the first quarter. And so this is going to be based on where we would expect to be now that we are 3 months into the budget cycle. So we're just going over trends and how far off we are, and then we'll just go into historical fund comparison and then budget versus actual and cash balances. So we're going to start with the trend and variance. So the numbers you see on the left are where we would expect to be for revenues and expenses 3 months in when we look at 2018, 19, and 20. So normally we're about 6.23% into our budget as far as revenues go, and then 11.5% on expenses. So that's just these first two columns on the left. And then if you bounce over to the variances will show where we're actually at in comparison to where we think we should be at. So right now we're about 67,000 under in revenues for the general fund, and then we're about $117,000 over in expenses. So for the general fund balance, we're about $185,000 under where we would like to be. And so if you just follow this down, it gives the breakdown for each individual fund. And so overall, the city's cash impact is about $507,000, almost 508. And so that's just going to result in this middle column to the left of the highlight. It's going to end with our cash balances roughly around 25,000, 1,044,561. And so normally when you look through a budget, since we're in a 24-month biennium, we're 3 months in, so we would normally be about 12.5%. If you didn't follow cash flow as much and you just did a basic monthly expense, that's where we would be. And right now expenses are over budget just a bit, and then revenues are under. So we're working through that. Okay, and then I just wanted to give a visual on where the revenue sources are coming from. So you can see that property taxes make up quite a bit of the general fund, and then sales tax are the closest, second largest, and then everything else is pretty small in comparison. So property tax isn't usually as volatile as sales and use tax to economy variances. So that is one thing that is nice. Since we do have property tax holding everything, that revenue source is not as, it doesn't fluctuate as much. Okay, so here I've got the 2021 budget. So this is where we should be for the first quarter. And then the 2021 actuals is where we're coming in. And then I just thought it was interesting to look at 2020 and 2019 to see where we were coming in. And so let me just find my notes. It looks like the difference, so something to consider is in 2020, at this point in time, we still had our passports office open, we still had recreation. So the difference in revenue between 2020 and 2021 is about 50% passport revenue, 17% recreational services, 10% central services. So those are things like your law enforcement officers, your zoning fees, planning fees, fingerprinting. And then you've got about 10% in interest and 11% in this miscellaneous category. And that actually is just revenue that's received from the stormwater fund to pay that debt payment. So it all washes. So that is the major difference here. And I will say when the 47% below quarter one budget for property taxes, so we get about 1.2% of what our total property tax line in the first quarter. So while 47% sounds really, really big because we don't receive as much in the first quarter, it's not as monumental because our large property tax payments come in May and November. And then sales tax is coming in well, so that is offsetting losses. Okay, and so I just thought I'd throw in here. So you can see that 2021 actuals are pretty close to budget. And then you can just see the trend for 2020 and where we're at. And I will note that we would have a larger revenue gap, but we did get a reimbursement for the CARES funding that we dispersed. The second round, we got reimbursed by the county. So we had to pay that money up front and then we were reimbursed the next year. It's really just a monthly difference, and then I thought this was really interesting because you can see how sales tax really took off in 2020. So I know we've got the farm going on, but I know a lot of the, not necessarily small, but smaller cities, as far as COVID goes, a lot of them actually had sales tax increases after COVID started because people weren't going as far out from their city as they used to. Like, so they weren't going to the next city over to go out to eat or buy or to shop. So that's something to keep in mind. And I thought that the fact that we had a difference between 2019 and 2021 of 53% was pretty, that's a huge gap. Okay.
Or was the higher sales tax this year in part due to people buying more online from home? Does that point of sale then bring the tax here instead of someone driving to Linwood and paying the tax, sales tax in Linwood?
I would say there are a lot of increases. So people are spending a lot more on fixing up their homes right now. So because people are stuck at home, they're spending a lot more to fix stuff up. So that's something that is happening across the nation. I think that probably is one of the biggest factors.
But you're right, online tax revenue from 19 and 20 wasn't being calculated.
I couldn't quite make that out. I don't know if someone was talking to me or not.
Oh, he was mumbling to me. It's okay. You can.
Okay.
I can't unmute myself.
Okay, so I just wanted to break this out. So in the general fund, the first column for 2021 is the actuals, And then those are in comparison to 2020. And then 2021 actuals in comparison to where we would expect the budget. So what we've budgeted, where we believe we should be. So that 6.23% of the budget to match cash flow to previous years. We're about $67,836 under budget. No. So we've got let's see. I'm sorry, I've got to get to the right page. Okay. So for this prior year, you can see that property taxes came in $100,000 under where we were at in 2020. So we had almost 200,000 come in last year. And then we're about $88,000 under where we would hope to be in the budget. And I will note that this more than likely will be made up in this next property tax payment from the county. So that's something to keep in mind. The sales tax is coming in about $65,000 over last year, and we're about $174,000 over what we had budgeted. So everywhere we're coming in under the sales tax, and the intergovernmental has really helped keep us afloat. So those have really taken the overall general fund and kept it at a decent, kept us with the budget. So we're only $67,000 under where we would hope to be, or about 4% overall. I will note that the intergovernmental line, that CARES funding is hitting there. So that's going to be stuff like your liquor tax, your motor vehicle tax, and then that reimbursement was hitting in there. So that's something to note.
Hey, Laurel, can you hear me?
Yes.
I had a question on that last slide. I found a way to get past the mute button here. On the sales and use tax, how much of that is the farm and how much of that is just increased sales tax revenue?
I will have to get back with you on that because I did not write that down.
Thank you.
Laurel, one more question on the property taxes.
Yes.
We pay our property taxes on April 30th and then October 31st. So is the money we see coming in the first quarter, is that just reflecting delinquent payments people are finally catching up on?
So that's going to be just your, it's going to be your delinquent ones, and it's just like little stuff that's coming in compared to other points in time.
So that variance really probably isn't that significant. What we really want to be looking for is the May numbers and the November numbers, when the big chunks of property taxes are paid and the county remits our share to us.
Correct. So May, we get the first half because people pay it at the end of April, and then, or in April, and then in November, we'll get that next one. So we've got two main payments, and that's why we only see about 1.2% of the total property tax revenue in the first quarter. So it's really nothing. You've got, almost 98% that we'll see throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah, because our total property taxes, aren't they 6 million or something, our property tax assessment? So
Yes.
we'll be seeing a 3 million, we should be seeing a $3 million number. Or, 3 million come springtime.
6.4 million. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. And so then as far as expenses go, we're about 3% over budget, and we're still below 2020. So I think that's something like we really tampered down in 2020, and we're still below prior year, but with the way the budget was set, we are still a bit over. And if you do split it with just a normal flow of 12.5%, we are under, but as far as previous years go, we we're over where we would expect to be. I feel like that was probably a bit confusing, but overall we're over where we would hope to be right now. And then I've got a breakdown here of how each department is doing. I will say we are working on the distribution of legal because we had it mainly in the city manager's fund. And I'm trying to split it out in a more transparent way. So like putting your open record requests in the city clerk's budget. So we will, when we do the mid biennium amendments, I'll redistribute that. And we're just working on finding the most transparent way to show where things are being spent. So your far left column here is just going to be your 2021 actuals, again, versus last year, and then versus where we should be in the budget right now based on spending patterns in the last 3 years to our actual budget. So overall, we're 3% over, but quite a few of these we've got legislative that's under. I mean, you can just walk through this far right column to see where we are versus budget. And I mean, we're still really early on. So I think in the next quarterly report, a lot of these numbers will be, they'll start to level out more. So that is something to keep in mind.
Hey, Laurel, what are the two big drivers there on HR and non-department? What's driving that?
So yes, let me find my notes. And I can give you those. Because I think we had talked about that. Okay. You know, I did not write that down, and I don't know where my notes went. So I am really, really sorry, and I will have to get back with you on that.
That's fine.
Because it looks like I started to write something and then I just stopped.
Okay, that's understandable. Maybe next time you could give us an update on that.
Yes.
Thanks.
I do know HR is where I moved the majority of the legal. And so I know there's litigation in there, there's actual HR stuff. Everything's kind of falling in there if it has anything to do with people. So that really, I do need to split that out, but we're still working on, you know, is there an individual line we want to hit? Is there an easier way to split this out so that so people can understand what's happening? So I can tell you that on the HR, I just cannot remember on the non-departmental.
Well, that would make sense then if you put legal expenses into HR, it wasn't projected in the budget.
Correct.
It's way overage when in fact it's just a redistribution. Okay.
Right. Yeah. And you can see, I know the majority of that had been in the city manager budget. And so you can see that that one is under quite a bit. So I'll get there hopefully before the next quarter. We'll have that fixed. Okay. So on the street fund, we are about just a bit over 1% under budget. And that's just from how the motor vehicle fuel tax is coming in. And so at the bottom of each of these fund revenues, I just threw in where the revenue usually came from, because I felt like that was some useful information, because a lot of people don't know what impact, you know, the different taxes have on these different funds. Okay, and then as you can see, we're pretty far under budget, but a lot of these, so from the street fund on, a lot of these have to do with salaries. So we are down our engineers. And so since the start of 2021, we haven't had salary expenses for these different positions. And I know we do have one that's starting at the end of May. So that will start to change. But right now, a lot of these funds, either the, the timing of projects, we were not doing stuff in January on streets as much maybe, and salaries are a big impact on these funds. So you can see in 2021, we're almost 50,000 under budget. So, and we're about 50,000 under our actuals also. But as soon as we have full staffing, I think some of these, well, I don't think, I know some of these expenses will start to come up again. Okay, and so then we've got the REIT fund revenue, and REIT's coming in really well right now. And we're about 28% over budget, and then 84 over 2020. And you can see the trend that normally in about May is when we get, and that would make sense with property taxes. So in May, you can see that it starts to climb quite a bit. And our budget, the blue line is the budget projection. So what we had budgeted for, and the 2020 is the green, but I think everyone can see that. Okay, so we did not budget any expenses in the REIT fund. So if we decide we need funding for specific capital projects from REIT that qualify, then we will have to do a budget amendment. I will say we had done a transfer in 2020 to cover some of the projects that were in the budget for 2021. And you can see as you walk across for the 2021 budget through 2020 actuals, there's nothing there. And they did have a project that they were funding in 2019 that they decided they needed money on. And then if you look at the chart on the right, you can see that the expenses in November went up because we did that transfer at the end of December. So we do have funding for projects that has already been transferred. And if we just decide that the projects in the budget are not something we're going to end up getting to, I'm going to need to move that money back. But for now, the reason we don't have expenses in this fund is because that funding is already sitting in the different capital project funds that it belongs to. Okay, so this is the capital improvement fund I was talking about. And you can see that the budget, I am pretty sure this is all just, well, I'm not pretty sure, this is all interest. So in 2021, the budget and the actual, we weren't expecting a lot of money to be flowing in right now because you're talking grants, transfers, and interest are how you fund the different projects from this fund. So as far as revenues go, they match that REIT. So the last slide we saw, the expenses from REIT transferred over to this capital improvement fund. And that's why that green line goes up as far as revenues go, because that is where that money went. Okay, and then here we do have capital improvements that we are expecting. And so that is why we've got about 135,000 budgeted. Right now, the $93 is actually the historical project, and that does need to get moved because originally that project had been budgeted here, but it didn't meet the $25,000 threshold, so it didn't actually need to be in here. So we moved that back to the arts fund. And then we also moved the transfer that had been done back to the arts fund because we had moved money into this fund in preparation for payments that didn't need to be made. So we are looking over the different capital improvement projects. I think it's going to be, we're going to really start moving forward once we do have our engineers on staff, because right now I think that's really holding everyone up, because we can only do so much at a time. So I think there's that, and we need to be considering, you know, the timing of these projects as far as where we would expect these expenses to be. So, and we are, to 2020, we are still, I mean, we haven't done anything, so we're 40,000 below, but I didn't feel like that was super helpful information at this point in time. Okay, so this is basically just, this is another capital improvement fund, and it's just specifically for parks. And right now, again, we have revenue that's just interest, and we had budgeted a little bit higher, but it's, I believe the mitigation fees just aren't in yet. So we'll have to, I need to look into that. And I'm thinking there, I want to say there was a transfer for a project in 2020, which is why that was so much higher. And then you can see that in March, there was a little bit, there was our first increase, and then it was pretty steady. And then in September is when the revenue started coming in. So at this point in time, not seeing a lot of revenue in that fund is not super concerning. So I would say at the next quarter, that's when, if we didn't have the revenue in this 2021 column, that's when I would be more concerned. Okay, as far as expenses go, right now we don't have anything in here, and we have about 65,000 budgeted and 95,000 from 2020. And at this point in time, you know, we're still working through the capital improvement projects, so we have not started spending yet. And if you look, it does look like 2020 March is when stuff started picking up. So that's when I would say by the next quarter, that's when we'll know what we are planning on doing, or we'll have already started those projects. Okay, then we have the road improvement fund, and revenues are coming in lower and lower than 2020, and we are 11% under budget. So not, it's $5,000, not super concerning, but something to watch. And on this right, you can see the transfer that came in 20, or that we would expect to come in based on 2018, 19, and 20. So this year we would expect toward the end of the year to get the transfers to fund those projects if needed. Okay, and this is one, when I was looking through, I was like, wow, we are really under budget. So this also is a fund that is impacted by the engineer salaries. So we've got quite a few engineers that we don't have at the moment, and they are all, we are looking to hire all of them. We have one coming, and I do believe that, I'm not entirely sure where we are at on the other two, but eventually the savings is not going to last. So that's just something I wanted to note. We are under 2020 and under budget. And then you can see on the right, it looks like about July is when we really had a spike in 2020, and the budget has just got a more gradual climb from January, but it does start to peak around July. Okay, then we have surface water. So we have these fees that are on the property tax statements. I've had a couple calls about these, people wanting to know, what is this fee? So the surface water fees that people pay on property taxes, this is where they go. So according to 2020, we are slightly above, and then we're also above budget, so that's nice. I do know we raised the fee. It was by ordinance, it was like a sliding fee, and we did bump up to $200 per residential household. So I know a lot of people are going to see that. I believe it was 175 in 2020. So that would explain how we are slightly, that could possibly explain how we're slightly over budget, or we just have delinquent payments that are coming in.
Michael, wasn't it beginning of 2020 that we switched to the county collecting our service water fee as part of our property taxes?
I want to say it was fairly recently that happened, because staff was talking to me about that.
But that would explain, wouldn't it, the jump from 19 to 20, because when it's rolled into the property tax bills, we're probably going to collect close to 100% of it, as opposed to having to deal with delinquent surface water fees.
Yeah, in comparison to 19, definitely, because with it going with your property taxes, you're not trying to hunt people down and send out individual bills. So I would agree that that is more than likely why the jump from 19 to 2021 happened. Okay, and so in here we do have expenses that are under budget. Again, we have engineers that are not having their salaries hit in these funds. So that does, when you've got benefits and salaries, that does really impact a fund. I will say I'm happy to note that the ARP funding did add surface water projects to the list of things that the funding could be spent for. So that is something to keep in mind as far as expenses go, because we do have an aging infrastructure. It does look like, even 2019 across through the budget is pretty steady. We do expect between 130 and 140,000 in expenses just on standard for the first quarter. Okay, and then all of these other funds I just kind of threw in here because they're smaller, and there wasn't a whole lot of meat to what didn't want to have to walk you through a million different slides. I will note the council contingency, that fund was rolled into the general fund in, I believe they did that last year, and it does look like we had an interest payment hit that will need to be moved to the general fund. So that first column, the 110, will go away for the next quarter. And then we had the municipal arts. We did have a project in the previous years, and we have not done anything. We don't have the need for revenue as much. We don't have anything. This fund is pretty set right now on funding. I want to say we have around $42,000 in there. I would say the main impact on revenue was the interest, because we were still making pretty good interest from 19 investments and part of 20s. So that would be the revenue difference in a lot of these.
Hey, Laurel, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
I'm not sure of the strategy or rationale. How come the council contingency fund that was eliminated? I know you said it was transferred over, the monies, but some of us have always used that as kind of a guide for these spare and pet projects that come up during the budget cycle. So I for one, like it. I'm not sure why it's not there, but I know it's, I'm not trying to get into the specifics or strategies of how to, do our budget, but I think it's, I think it works having as a standalone line item.
I know, so I'm not 100% sure why they made the decision. I will say I know there was some discussion with auditors, and I just know that they had said they'd rolled it into the legislative piece of the general fund. But I mean, I can find that out for sure.
Please.
Okay. Okay, and then I would say more than likely we're just down. We've got a lease payment that more than likely was paid at a different time. I know leases are down, so that would explain the revenue in the City Hall North. And then I will note on 521 on the unemployment comp, we will need to do a transfer in here to cover for our next slide. The difference in revenue in the equipment replacement, we did have some police vehicles that were replaced at the beginning of the year in previous years. And so that's what that revenue difference is that transfer didn't come into that fund. Okay, and so here you can see with the equipment replacement, because we were just talking about that. So versus prior year, we had spent $107,000 more than where we're at. So that's expected because we haven't made any vehicle purchases yet. So that's not anything that anyone should be concerned about. And then the other thing was we will need a budget amendment to cover for the expenses in 521 for the unemployment comp and self-insurance, just because we didn't budget anything in there at all. So we're just, to make sure we don't have any budget violations, we'll just need to amend that. It's not a big deal. Amendments are pretty common as long as usually they are for if we have additional revenue, but to offset an additional expense. But occasionally, as long as it's only on occasion, you won't be eating into your cash reserves. So it's just not a good practice to continually do budget amendments to increase your expenses. But I don't think that's an issue that you guys have had.
Laurel, could you go back to the prior slide, please?
Yes.
To follow up on Councilmember Cavallari's question, the council contingency, there's no revenues there because that's just an allocation from our general fund that we put towards that line item for council contingency. So the revenue that goes into there, would that just be the interest on the money that's sitting in that account?
Yeah, so interest is just split. So when we get interest in, we just split it based on fund balances. And so that's where the majority of these are just, oh, I'm so sorry. The majority of these in that revenue column for 2021, those small, so like your local revitalization, that your council contingency, your municipal arts, all of these small amounts, those are just pieces of the interest payment because we just break it out throughout all of our funds.
Right, because there's no revenue source tied to our council contingency. So my recollection was, as he said, that we moved, when we did the budget last year, I think we adjusted the council contingency downwards slightly, but that was just an allocation of money that we previously paid out of that fund and we moved it into another one.
Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How does everyone else feel about, and I mean, I guess since we're on the topic, about maybe keeping some, the reason I ask that is I can think of one project this year I'm going to hit up for council contingency money, but whether it was striping outside the elementary school or line dancing for the seniors, having that pool of cash that we know is in there just kind of gives us flexibility and a quick reference or resource to check to make sure that money is available if the citizen or a group has a need that we can accommodate fairly easily without having to go back to the budget process.
We still have a council contingency in the budget. So I'm not sure what the question is. This is just an update on the revenues. This doesn't reflect any changes to the council contingency. It still exists. I can't tell you what the amount is that's in there, but we did not eliminate it. We adjusted it slightly. So it's still there.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep, and I can look into that for you. and let you know how much is in there exactly, if you would like. I just know I was told that they were rolling that into the general fund. So I'm
Okay.
glad to know that.
Thanks, Laura.
Okay, and then this, I was just gonna show you, this is just your cash balance over the years. So the general fund is the blue line, and then just all of the funds, including the general fund, are in the red line. And I just thought it was interesting. You can see that in 2019, cash balances were falling. So you can see that in 16, 17, and 18, they were growing. So they were continuing to go up, and then they did take the dip in 19, and then it looks like there was some work done to reestablish those balances. And I just wanted to note that we're in a good place right now. And I think this is my last slide, so happy to take any other questions.
What's causing the draw? I mean, the numbers that you had are, our expenses are only ahead of our revenues. I think it was by a fairly small amount so far through the first quarter, but this shows a $600,000 drop in the general fund between the end of last year and now.
Right, so I mean, it would just be your expenses that ended up hitting. I know we had some 2020 expenses that came out in 2021, but that were still technically 2020 expenses. They just, you have until, I think it was like mid-February, or maybe it was, I don't know, it's like the end of January or February to get all of your expenses tied together for your 2020 year. Because you have, last minute end of year purchases to make sure that things that were approved in the budget get paid for. And so that you don't have 2020 items getting paid in the 2021 budget cycle. So I'm going to say that's going to be your biggest factor there. So that's going to be where that drop came from.
And these are cash balances, so not budgets. You can see that the movement of the funds from general fund to all funds, you add them together, we're going from 29 to 30 million. So it's a movement of cash reallocations and things, right? But I'm looking at 20 to 21.
I was just
At the bottom
talking
line.
like your movement from general fund from the 7.5 to the 6.8, unless we're talking about something
And
else.
then I look at all funds from 22.9 to 24.6. We're going
all
out.
funds still.
Yeah, so that's your funds overall.
Reallocation, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it's cash balances, not budgets. We're doing. This is cash accounting.
Yes. I may have been answering the wrong question. I'm sorry.
This, as long as I got the mic here for a second, great job, Laura. This, as I listen to the whole presentation, what I'm hearing is we're pretty close on both. We have a couple of issues. You've already identified them for us. We don't have to do the analysis to figure it out. Great job. Nothing here that's huge or concerning. I do also appreciate that you are looking, that we, just so everybody understands, we cannot look at our budget as a flatlined budget. There are percent distributions of when the money will be coming in first quarter. Just because it's 3 months out of 12 doesn't mean we get 24% of the budget to that quarter. It really depends on when the distribution of revenues and expenses come in. So I appreciate you doing the trend. That's very important. One thing I would ask or request, not on this one because I don't think we need to, you kind of allocated it. There's no real big concerns or issues that I see here. But when we get into the next one and we look at second quarter and more importantly, our 6-month review, I really would like to see you have captured the revenue year to date or the expense year to date, and could you give us a next to that line, next to that column, a target number of what the budget should be based on that trend distribution? In other words, if we're at a revenue of $2 million, we should be at what number? Just so I can see that number, we should be at 2.5 million. So it helps to look at the individual line items, but I don't think that's necessary now. But the next time we go through this, I would like to see that. You're doing all the work, so we don't have to do it, but I do love to look at numbers.
Yes, I can do that.
Any other questions? I guess the one additional comment I would make is the numbers show that we're slightly ahead on expenses for the year. But my recollection is we tightened the belt. The city manager did a good job of tightening the belts with our budget last year. So they were very conservative on our expenses. So if we're ahead in the expenses a little bit, it's not necessarily a bad thing because we tightened pretty hard at the end of last year and with all the uncertainties of COVID still looming. So we are ahead in expenses, but we were very conservative with the budget.
That is true. And we do have a couple contracts that we just weren't expecting. We just didn't quite budget as much, and that's fine. It happens. And so we're just catching up on those, and it can be corrected in the mid-biennium.
Okay. Any final questions, comments from anyone? Thank you, Laurel. Thank you, Michael, for all that work. Appreciate it. It's a good update. And I guess we'll figure out whether or not we'll be able to do the second quarter update in July, or we'll just have to figure out the timing of when we'll have enough information to be able to do that since we take August off. So possibly the end of July, maybe beginning of September. Okay, thank you. With that, we move on to our study session. I'll turn the floor over to Michael and Karen.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight's discussion, the purpose of it is really for us to provide council with a list of roughly 12 facilities that we propose we survey based on all the work we've done to date and the way in which we've categorized it. You'll see the slideshow and the way in which Karen has set this up in a moment. We're also going to propose a list of questions to ask owners and operators of these facilities so that we can get a sense of what their experience has been, not only with regard to construction, but operation, maintenance, staffing, and the long-term costs associated with their facilities. Our goal is in receiving direction from council this evening. We would then work to complete this segment of our journey by June 30th. 2021 of this year. So with that brief introduction, Karen, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everyone. And thanks to Mike Todd for driving the PowerPoint. As Michael said, we're just sort of following up on one of the tasks that we identified we would do for you all in the exploratory phase here. The facilities survey is intended as sort of a very high level examination of how some of the types of facilities that you've identified a potential interest in, how is it going for public owners of those types of facilities in our area? So next slide, please. Tonight we're looking simply for your direction on what facilities should the staff group follow up on, and do we have the right list of questions. We are not going to be doing a magnum opus on each of these facilities, but we did want to try to get some good top lines that would be helpful for you in thinking about how you would like to proceed here. The next slide, please. So to quickly recap, in February, we started this discussion, and the first thing that you all did was to approve some initial tasks to take place in this initial phase. And then you also adopted the set of 6 guiding principles that are set forth on the slide there below. Those should look pretty familiar at this point. Next slide, please. And then in March, we reviewed a calendar for the overall project with you. We sort of see this as falling in 4 phases. And we also in March launched the community survey. We got really a tremendous response, and we presented this results to you in early April, and followed on that presentation with the last time I was chatting with y'all on some brainstorming for potential mixed uses on the property. And these 5 things at the bottom here are the types of facilities that you all most frequently mention. This is not to say this is what we're going to do. This is just some of the things that received a high level of interest. So next slide, please. So what we did also at the last time we were here, we said, okay, let's think of some examples of facilities you would be interested in exploring further. And we asked every council member for their ideas. And we also asked for what your top 1 or 2 were, with if you had like a list of 6 or 7 or a whole bunch, we wanted to know which you were most interested in. And on this table, you can see the 5 categories of that we identified with you, the facilities you identified, and then a handful of facilities that we identified with the staff team. And we're going to go through these really quickly tonight, but then at the end of this discussion, we're hoping to get some direction on, is this the right set of facilities that you would like us to explore? Are there some other ones? I heard Mr. Nelson in the comments before suggesting that we add the Edmonds Performing Arts Center to the list here. So right now we have 3 community centers and the Linwood Convention Center and Recreation Center. I had a little bit of confusion about whether, I believe someone asked for the Convention Center, but I wasn't sure if that's what y'all really wanted or if it was the Recreation Center. So we got slides on both of those. Under the Boys and Girls Club column, the direction was to talk to the head of the Snohomish County Boys and Girls Club for his suggestions on a couple of facilities. He suggested the ones in Mukilteo and Arlington as good examples. And we've also tossed in one from King County down in Bellevue because it's in a mixed use park of about the same acreage as the parcel that we're looking at here. Performing arts centers, the top 2 were the top 2 identified by Councilmember Steckler and another council member, and I'm sorry, I apologize, I don't remember exactly who suggested we look at the performance space at Linwood High School, so that's there as well. On ball fields, we have the suggestion we got was on the North County Sports Complex in Castle Rock. We added the Everett Complex, the Cash Athletic Complex you're probably familiar with, and just our own park here in the city for good reference, since y'all are pretty familiar with that, but still it's a good reference to have something in there that you really know well. On open fields and trails, several of the facilities that we have here include some trails. So the trails sort of happen in multiple places, but we also added something that was really focused on sort of green space and the outdoors and that and you may not find this one interesting, but we tossed in the Bellevue Botanical Gardens for that purpose. So now, unless there's any questions, I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly, and then we'll come back and see what your direction is on which facilities you would like to study. And I'm not seeing if anyone has their hand up, so feel free to just chime in if you have a question for me. Okay, so this is our first community center that was identified by council, the Mukilteo Community Center, the Rose Hill Community Center. It is a 29,000 square foot building. It's on a beautiful site with a view of the water. It has both event space, sort of wedding venue space, classroom space. This is a stage for performances that you also see in the picture there in the middle. So this is our first facility. Next slide. Here is where we weren't quite sure if you meant the convention center or the recreation center. The convention center, picture of it here, it's almost 54,000 square feet. It can accommodate a whole lot of folks. It is owned by a public facilities district created by Linwood and managed by a private firm. Next slide, please. The recreation center in Linwood is very much aquatic centered. It's got the pool and a lap pool and hot tubs, and it also has a couple courts and classrooms, but it's largely an aquatic center. And of course, we know that the Seven Seas is scheduled to put in an aquatics facility on the parcel that they own right adjacent to our parcel. So that's why, again, I had a little confusion if this was what folks were looking at or the convention center or what. So here's this facility. Next slide, please. The Tukwila Community Center, staff added that at my suggestion, frankly, it's one of probably the most heavily used community centers in King County. It has become really a very popular meeting space. This has banquet facilities. It has those outdoor amenities that are like the splash pad water park, picnic shelters, trails around the site that are sort of some of the mixed use outside of the facility. So you both have indoor and outdoor spaces. There's a gymnasium in this facility as well. Next. Montlake Terrace Senior Center was a council suggestion, and this is in a lovely park. It used to be a clubhouse, and it was, once the city owned the park, they did a partnership with the Montlake Terrace Seniors Group, who is operating the facility, and I believe the city owns it, but this is another facility we might explore. Next slide, please. The Mukilteo Boys and Girls Club. It may not be much to look at from the outside, but it has an amazing gym and some classroom space and just hanging out space for kids. This is, again, one of the facilities that was recommended to us by the head of the Snohomish County Boys and Girls Club as one to take a look at. Next slide, please. The Arlington Boys and Girls Club, the other one. This also has a pool as one of the central focuses, but it also has some fields, as you can see here, and some indoor space for the kids to be able to meet at. Next slide, please. This was the third Boys and Girls Club facility we added simply because it is on a facility. It's a mixed use park, about the same number of acres as what we're looking at here. And they've managed to squish in not only parking, but 3 softball fields, play picnic areas, tennis court, this field house that is run by the Boys and Girls Club in partnership with the city of Bellevue. We thought that might be potentially interesting. Next slide, please. This was Councilmember Steckler's #1 choice for performing arts centers to study. And it was created between a partnership of several folks, as you can see there, the city, the school district, a community foundation, and IKEA is the name on it because they paid for naming rights. It's a 551 seat venue and has all the ancillary spaces you would expect in a performing arts center. Next, please. The Kirkland Performing Arts Center, I believe, is Councilmember Steckler's #2 choice on his list. 394 seats, a really steep rise in the theater space so that everybody has a beautiful line of sight for watching what's going on there. It is owned by Kirkland and it is operated by a nonprofit corporation that was formed specifically for the purpose of operating it. Next slide, please. The Linwood High School Theater. Again, someone mentioned this last time. It's an amazing looking space, and we could also take a look at this. I don't have the specs on how many seats it is, but this is another option for us to take a look at. It's open, it's operated and owned by the school district. The Castle Rock Sports Complex, it took a while to figure out how to find these folks, but we did. And basically this is built on about 70 acres of land that was created when the Corps of Engineers dredged the river after Mount St. Helens blew up. So the city suddenly had a bunch of land. It was actually gifted by the Corps of Engineers to the school district in Castle Rock, and there has been this avid core of volunteers. They created a nonprofit, and it's all volunteer labor, and they partner with the city and the school district to get grants to try to help fund some of the projects, but it's largely volunteer operated. It's obviously a much larger piece of property than we have, but they have a lot of interesting things there, including the walking trail and the 9-hole disc golf course. They use the concession stand and the new picnic shelter as major revenue sources to try to support their operations. Cash Memorial Park, we have softball and baseball fields. We have synthetic turf fields for soccer, and there are a variety of other sort of ancillary facilities there at that park as well. Next slide, please. Mill Creek, we all know this one. This immaculately kept facility with joint use softball and soccer field, the concession stand, and the skateboard park. Next slide, please. This is the last facility, the Botanical Gardens in Bellevue. It has a small house that was on the parcel originally that is now used as a sort of a small event center. You can rent it, event space, and there are trails throughout the property. And it's one of their major fundraisers to keep the whole thing going every year is they decorate the heck out of the gardens every Christmas, and it's a major light show that people pay to walk through the gardens, and that's how they support a chunk of the operations of this facility, although I believe the city of Bellevue also supports it on an ongoing basis. And so those were our facilities that we looked at. So now I would sort of like to open it up to you all for suggestions. We can go and get information on all of these facilities. We can take some of these out if they don't seem terribly interesting. We could add one or two more. We're trying to keep it down to a dull roar so that we have the capacity to get through this. And our, of course, success will depend on our ability to find people that actually know things at each of these places, that know how things were funded 20 years ago or whenever, when some of these facilities were built. But that's the task, and we're going to go tackle that next. So looking for some feedback or direction on, do you want us to chase down this list? Would you like to suggest some amendments? You want to have a discussion about it? Whatever works for you all.
Karen, this is Councilman Stecker. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, good. Just a couple suggestions. And maybe my fellow council members can help me with this, but on the community center or civic center idea, there was one recently I read on the news of Oak Creek that the state granted 2.1 million to, was it Silver Lake Community Center or City of Silver Lake? I heard something about that. I could find that out, but I think that was just recently awarded to their community center nearby. I think that would be a very good one for us to talk to learn out what they're doing. Obviously, they're doing something right. The state liked it. They approved a huge amount of funding for them. It'd probably be a good one for us to be talking to. I don't think that was
right.
Or it's the other one. Not Silver Lake.
It might be this one, City of Seattle.
No.
Provides 10 million right here.
Not Lake Terrace or Lake Stevens?
Lake Stevens. That's it. Lake Stevens.
Lake Stevens, yeah, got a nice grant.
Okay.
Yeah, $2.1 million grant for a civic center. So it might be nice to talk to them, find out what they did, what they proposed, what kind of facility they're building. Just might be a good one for us to look at.
I'm going to ask the unfair question. Is there anything you would propose to take off this list in exchange for that? We're just trying to have this.
Probably the Montana Terrace Senior Center, because the one about that one is what could be rebuilt, but we don't really have anything to rebuild. So what you could learn there could be great if we had a cool little clubhouse or something we could renovate. But this one is building something from the ground up, so that'd be my recommendation. But that's just me alone.
Okay, I see Councilmember Briles has his hand up. Go ahead, sir.
Yes. So I think in my mind, I was pointing more to the Linwood Convention Center than the Recreation Center.
Okay.
If that's so, if the idea there that I can take credit for removing one. I have recently visited the Rhododendron Species Botanical Garden in Federal Way, and that would be an interesting one to look at, open fields and trails. It seemed like they didn't have very many. Part of it is a very large building, but right now is closed. And so in how they are currently operating, I think maybe a way of interest for us in that open fields and trails kind of thing. So that may be one to add if I got credit for removing the one.
So take off, and we'll come back and see where everybody ends up on this, but it's take
Right.
off the Recreation Center and leave the Convention Center on and add the Rhododendron Garden in Federal Way. Okay. Anyone else? Anything on here you really like? No, that didn't look nearly like what I thought it would. Let's not bother.
I'll chime in. I agree with removing the Linwood Recreation Center. I don't think it's relevant, as well as the Mont Lake Senior Center.
Okay.
One that I would pair with Linwood is, I think Glacier Peak also built a venue as part of their new high school. So I would lump that in with Linwood High School as two examples of how a venue like that was incorporated into a building as opposed to a standalone.
You're speaking to the Linwood High School performance space?
Yeah, there's also one at Glacier Peak that would be interesting to look at.
Is it the same school district? Sorry for my
No,
ignorance.
it's Snohomish School District, Glacier
Okay.
Peak, just east of Mill Creek. And as we consider whether we build the One Accord Performance Center, I would be in with the Edmonds facility. What does John or Karen, do you know how big that facility is? Number of seats?
800.
It's huge.
So I was surprised by how small the IKEA and Kirkland are. They're relevant, they're equivalent size. And so I guess with Edmonds, I'm more interested in knowing not about the facility, but how, with the city closer in size to us than either Renton or Kirkland, how their finances work for the project.
If that were the case, I'd really recommend Monroe. That's probably the closest one to
Do
our
they have
city.
one?
Yeah, they have a theater. And they run it year round. And it's closer to our population size.
Yeah, I would be, because I like the size of IKEA and Kirkland and Linwood. They all seem to be in that 300 to 500 seat sweet spot, which I think is what at least I had in mind. So I'm not sure I would throw Edmonds on there, but I would support looking at Monroe if it's more in line with that.
Monroe.
But overall, I thought this was a pretty good, helpful list to provide us some information as we move forward with this discussion.
Thank you. Anyone else out there? Councilmember Bond, Councilmember Cavallari, Deputy Mayor Vignal, any input on this list here?
I would dump Mount Lake Terrace Senior Center and the Linwood Recreation Center. I agree with that.
All right, we got some concurrence there.
Yeah, I agree with that, dumping them out Lake Terrace Center and the Linwood Recreation Center. I guess I would throw out to everyone, is the Bellevue Botanical Gardens. I love it. I love taking my family for a walk there, but is that in our ideas here? Do we need to keep that on there for them to look at? Is just my question, because I feel like everybody
if we replace it with Federal Way, maybe Federal Way is more in line with what you were envisioning.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to help you get rid of something. So yeah, so I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but I just kind of feel like, especially if we're going to throw a different one on there, that perhaps the Bellevue Botanical Gardens, at least I know what it is and go often. So I don't know if anybody else needs a study on that one, but I could see us throwing that one off to help you out. So
I'm not against removing the botanical gardens either, unless somebody feels real passionate about keeping it on there. I'll keep an open mind, but that's not really on my spectrum of where I was going with this project.
I would agree with Councilmember Bond.
Me too.
Same here.
All righty. Any other?
Slashing.
Hey, Karen, you can,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Karen,
Yeah.
Vince Cavallari here. I think we can also probably eliminate the North County Sports Complex in Castle Rock. I mean, what is it, 70 plus acres out there? 70? Yeah, it's quite a footprint, and it's really not even relevant to our discussion here. I don't think. I mean, I like the concept of the open fields, but.
Okay, yeah. Are you okay with that, Councilmember Bond? I thought a little thumbs up there. Okay, because I know that was as I recall, that may have been your suggestion. I could be wrong on that. Okay. All right. So anyone else? And I'll see where we are. I'll just try to recap where I think we are. We are, anyone else? We're good now. So we will be keeping Mukilteo, keeping the Linwood Convention Center, not looking at the Recreation Center in Linwood, keeping the Tukwila Community Center, eliminating the Montlake Senior Center, keeping all 3 Boys and Girls Clubs on the list, keeping these 3 performing arts centers on the list. And go ahead, Deputy Mayor Vignal.
I have a question, Karen, and maybe the mayor can help me answer this. I'm wondering if we need you to go to all 3 boys and girls clubs, especially since I think one of the things we were just discussing was possibly having someone come in and talk to us about what was possible for us to do for what our needs are, or do we need to just study one? And I will bounce that back to the mayor to get his feedback on that question.
I would advocate for leaving all 3 on, not necessarily for the facilities themselves, but I think each one of them has unique financing aspects to them. I mean, a lot of our discussion was on how these projects are built and funded, and I think each one of those is unique in that way. So I think that might be helpful to hear how a project like that was pulled off financially.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so, and I'll be doubling back to community centers at the end of this. So Boys and Girls Club here stays, the Performing Arts Centers listed here stay, and I think the request was to add the City of Monroe Performance Center. On ball fields, take off North County, leave those other 2 in here, remove the Bellevue Botanical Gardens and add in its stead the Rhododendron Garden in Federal Way, and then add in 2 back in the first column, 2 more community centers, the Silver Lake Community Center and the Lake Stevens Civic Center, which is in process. I think they've got a building built. I was there with them last fall. It's pretty cool. So I think,
just to clarify, Karen, between Lake Stevens and Silver Lake, the one that got the funding, I believe, is Lake Stevens.
I saw something with the grant for them. Do you guys want me to focus on one or the other? Lake Stevens is right in your backyard, sort of.
I'm interested in you talking to the one that got the grant for 2.1 million from the state, just to learn from them.
All right, well, I'll say
That's
whichever one of those it was.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Danielle, do you remember?
I thought it was Lake Stevens that had the 2.1, but I can find out for you.
Why don't we look into that and figure out which one that was and go with that one.
That's, I'll look into it too. One of us will get back to you, Karen.
Okay, that's fine. So whichever one got that grant is the one we will add to the community centers list.
Yes.
And so if that is okay, that's the direction we will go. Any concerns with that?
No concerns, but I have a suggestion for the
Yes,
coming
sir.
months that might help shape our discussion. One of the things that drives or will drive what we can do on the site is the parking requirements.
Yep.
And so, I mean, I think it'd be helpful for each one of these categories, like with ball fields.
Yep.
You know, if we were to put 2 or 3 fields, what were the parking requirements? How much space would that leave us on the site?
Yes.
Same thing
very
with
much
the Performing Arts Center. Community center and a Boys and Girls Club, I think would be similar, but assuming we had I think there was consensus of one of the ideas we're looking at is a community center that has multiple uses. And if that's the case, what is the parking requirement? Because that'll work us backwards into what remains developable to focus on what of these options is really an option given our constraints of our code.
Yeah, you're totally right. And that's actually one of the questions we'd like to ask folks because parking is such a space hog. And we really want to be mindful of what are the code requirements likely to be for these various types of uses. Next slide, this slide. Yes, sir. I mean, me, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I looked up and I'm right. It's Lake Stevens. They got 2.1 million for a civic center. So I'm not sure what is included in the civic center, but they did get 2.1 million in the budget.
It's a big meeting space and council space. The council holds their meetings there, and one is basically 2 giant rooms, and the other is another just community room. It's a very cool facility. So I'm sorry. We will track down that list of facilities. Unless anybody has a last wants to chime in here at the end here before we move on to this, what we want to ask them. So folks generally okay with this list, we will proceed. Thank you. And so this is sort of the range of questions we would like to ask people. Again, we may not get answers to all of them, but most of them we should. And we want to basically figure out what's the ownership and operation arrangement? Where did they get the money to build it? Did they do bonds, grants? Did they do a mix of everything? How much is the ongoing operating cost? And where is that money coming from? Is the level of usage what they anticipated when they built it? Or is it more or less than what they were planning for? We definitely want to look at the amount of parking that they've been using. And we wanted to look also at the needs assessment, because we remain slightly question like, what did you study? What the did you have a big needs assessment done before you launched this project? Since we remain a little bit befuddled about how to do a needs assessment for everything. But maybe that makes more sense when we are focused in on a couple of different ideas, a couple, 3 or 4 ideas. And also just general lessons learned. We didn't anticipate this, but this turned out to be really important for us. So that's, and having done these before, what we're going to bring back to you is not a lot of words. It's going to be basically a page and a half for each facility in a template format with just, a sentence or 2 and the basic facts, bullet points that we hear from talking with folks. And I think it can be pretty helpful just in sort of thinking about what might be to be the owner of a facility of one of these types. So are there any questions or suggestions on this list of questions? If you could back up, sorry, that slide
Sorry.
there. Do those look like okay questions, or are we missing something you'd be really interested in?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Just on the question, I think you say it here, but what's important is usage, even pulling that out. I think you say uses, but I'd really like to know how they are using these facilities, whichever one they are, the community centers, the theaters, the ballparks, actual usage, specific usage, who's using them, how often they're using them, how much they're being used, the actual usage levels and involvement, who's using it.
Now that could be quite a complicated set of data. I could probably get a list of the range of uses, but I don't know that I'll be able to get like the number of days that each field was occupied in the last 3 years. You know what I'm saying?
No, I just want to know how it's being used by the community.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else questions that we should ask? Yeah, Councilmember Briles.
Yes, I had one thing there in which I'd like to see what input they gathered from their community before making this,
okay,
how they went about getting that input, and of course any lessons learned that they have specifically about that.
Okay.
Even though that might go into the bigger picture of lessons learned.
Yeah, and again, if I'm going to describe the community process, that could end up being several pages of data, but we can certainly ask folks about, high points in terms of what did you do a public engagement process in your decision making, and what aspect of that was particularly helpful or noteworthy, and lessons learned. Would that help? Okay, thanks. Helpful lessons learned. Okay, anyone else here? Does this look like data? Councilmember Cavallari?
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Karen. I would also like to see his questions on here on how these facilities run financially. Do they run at a loss? Do they run at a higher loss than expected?
Yep.
Here's, maybe I'm not saying it right, but like a good example is like Cash Park in Everett is, with that concept of just having the fields versus a place like Mukilteo. How much of a burden is it to, when you start punching up or pulling out the pie charts, how much of a burden is it to each, like Parks and Rec or however it's funded? How much of a burden is it to the city or that department? Is it a funding source? Is it constantly over budget? Is it constantly expanding? I think those are probably relevant questions. I just don't know how to put them all together.
Yeah, that is definitely a central focus. That would be at that bottom left corner, the city role in operations, and the top right, facility annual operating budget, financial performance. So we want to know Are any of these netting revenue? I think more realistically, what's the ongoing subsidy to keep the facility open? And is that in line with what you expected? Is it trending worse or better? And of course, we're going to have last year's going to be a complete anomaly. So we'll just throw out that data. But so that's definitely what we would like to get you guys a sense of the magnitude there for these different facility types. Yeah.
Thanks, Karen. And one more kind of a sidebar question. I had it written down from last time, and you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. How much of a footprint does a 9-hole disc golf course take up?
I think it would depend. I have walked through some that are just, you couldn't tell they were even there because it's just basically a beautiful wooded open space and people are having picnics, and every once in a while someone yells 4 and you duck and a Frisbee goes over your head. So you can, and you know, dogs are wandering around, kids are playing. So it really depends on the setup of the course, but we can try to figure out by looking at some of the other facilities in the region.
Now, the reason I ask is because I know we're going to have some space left over in the wetlands area that's not going to be buildable land, and it's really for more recreational. So that it might tie in somehow. I was down in Florida the last couple of weeks, and I was shocked at all the disc golf courses and the people that actually play it. And a month ago, I really didn't even know it existed except for a Seinfeld episode. So I'm open to hearing it and learning more about it.
Okay.
Well, it's relevant to know also the size to the extent we could consider incorporating it into one of our existing parks.
I like it.
So Everett has a disc golf course over at the, what is that park on the lake there at Silver Lake on the north end? I don't know if they.
Yeah, Thomas A. Sullivan Park.
Yeah. So maybe we could get some info from Everett on, I don't know if we want to add that. I don't know anything about disc golf, so.
I think that's actually the county, just for the record.
Okay.
And not Everett.
Okay.
Well, we'll try to get some a fix on acreage for disc golf courses. Okay, we'll add that. All righty. Next, if this is it, we will chase down these questions plus the really looking at who is using the facility at a high level and asking a bit about the community input process. We will add those two things. All right, so the next steps here, we will get launched here and we will hope to come back to you either towards the end of June or the very beginning of July. It'll depend on how much luck we have tracking down people that can answer these questions. We're also working on an agenda for a retreat with y'all to have more of an in-depth discussion about all of this. We're working on the idea of the panelists' presentations. We might break that up over a couple of evenings to give people, if we're actually asking them to come talk to you, give them more than 37 seconds to talk, which might mean we divide it up into a couple of evenings. And we wanted to let you know that we have spent about 3/4 of the 40,000 in the budget for this so far. And so budget will end up being an item on the retreat agenda for how you'd like to start thinking about that vis-a-vis balance of the year, but also the 2022 budget. Yeah, Councilmember Briles, go ahead.
Just one last thing. I just said that I thought Thornton A. Sullivan was the county. I looked it up. It is Everett. Councilmember Bond was correct. I just wanted to, I don't want to send you looking to the wrong people.
Thank you. I appreciate that because I would have. Okay. Councilmember Cavallari, your hand is up, but you are not there. So I'm thinking that might just be from before. Anyone have anything, other questions for us at this point? Councilmember Bond?
Just a thank you for what you put together on this. I really enjoyed the pictures and the summaries. I'm terrified of the cost, but I look at some of these facilities and I think, you know what, if we could find a way to fund it, it'd be pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of neat things here that if we could find a path to making one of these projects viable for us, I think it would be a blessing to the city. So seeing the photos and what you put together kind of helped build a little more of the dream, if you will, as to what maybe we could do. So thanks for the work.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Anyone else? All righty then. I will leave you to it. Nice to see you all, and we'll be back when we have more to chat with you about. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Karen.
Thank you.
Okay, we're
Thanks,
gonna go,
Karen.
we're gonna go to old business now. The item on old business is the governance manual. As I said last week, we will have substantive discussion and action if we so desire at our next meeting in 2 weeks. So it was back on the agenda, mainly because the proposed final package was presented to us for the first time last week. So this is an opportunity to ask some questions of the city attorney, any comments that we want to consider going forward before we bring it back in 2 weeks. Councilmember Briles.
I did have just one thing. I'd sent a note to Grant specifically about in the resolution there. I think it said that we could that we can suspend the rules with either a unanimous consent or the majority of the body. And I would like to either pick one or go with what is typical in Robert's rules, which is 2/3 of those present and voting for that. That was one thing that I saw in there that of substance. So if that's what we're discussing, that I'd like to amend. I'd like to make a motion to amend, if that's appropriate here.
There's no motion before us yet, so we can have that discussion next time.
Okay.
Any other question? And I know that we are making the grammatical corrections that have been pointed out. We're going through with a fine-tooth comb to make sure we're getting everything grammatically correct. Thank you.
Yeah, Mayor, we'll send around a revised version to the council tomorrow.
Okay. With that, be prepared for discussion 2 weeks from now. So hearing no further questions or comments, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Item F is approval of checks number 63304 through 63553 and ACH wire transfers in the amount of $228,655.99. The audit committee was Councilmember Bond and Mayor Pro Tem Vignal. Any exceptions?
No exceptions.
No exceptions.
Item G, payroll and benefit ACH payments in the amount of $184,674.91. Any exceptions?
No exceptions.
No exceptions.
And item H, city council meeting minutes of April 27th, 2021 and May 4th, 2021. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Did anyone abstain? Consent agenda is approved 7-0. Reports, the only thing I had to report is the mayor's meeting last week. The focus of discussion was meetings and how the various cities have been dealing with the incident we had last week while we were in executive session of the unwelcome visitors we had contributing negatively to the public discourse. So it's not unique to us. We are a little unique. I think we're one of the first cities in the county to move towards having the option for the public to participate in person, although for the second meeting in a row, I'll let the record reflect there is no one else here besides our IT manager, the city manager, and the 3 council members that are in the chambers. So with that, Mayor Pro Tem, any report tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. Last week, Councilmember Cavallari was on vacation, so as the alternate, I went and participated with the Parks Board, and not too much going on there. Well, I said that wrong. There's a lot going on, but not too much to report. They are very busy brainstorming and coming up with a lot of fun, neat ideas, and I can't wait to see what they're going to come up with. And they were also doing a little discussion on some things to do for the Youth Advisory Board, which will be very exciting as well. So that's really what they had going on, and they are compiling the signs. As we know, Councilmember Cavallari pointed that out before, that they've been going around and cataloging the signs that need replaced, and they are also getting ready to do their annual tour of all the parks where they go through and make a list of things for improvements and check on all the parks. So that is pretty much what they're up to right now. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bond, any report tonight?
No report.
Councilmember Steckler,
No report.
Councilmember Cavallari,
No report, Mayor, but I did want to extend a bit of gratitude to the Mayor Pro Tem for stepping in and chairing the meeting for me while I was on vacation. Her succinct analysis of the meeting is spot on. And it's also her mention of the Youth Advisory Board is where I'll be probably hitting up the so-called council contingency fund at some point, if we ever get that back. So anyway, that's it, Mayor. Thanks.
thank you. Councilmember Briles, any report tonight?
No report.
And Councilmember Morgan, there you are, right there. Looking for you on the screen when you're right to my left.
He's the only other person that looked to your left.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. City Manager, I'll turn it over to you for staff reports.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. First up, we want to give you an update on the Jackson High School parade, which, as we know, has expanded to include other high schools as well. The parade is scheduled for Saturday, June 12th, starting at 10 a.m. in Jackson. We're staging it in the Jackson High School parking lot. This is a week before the Jackson High graduation ceremony scheduled for Saturday, June 19th. The parade location has been reserved and it's been approved by the school district. Check-in for the parade will begin at 9 a.m. We are meeting this week, including our police chief, Young, Director Todd, Public Works Supervisor Matthew Combs, and Kristen Rasmussen to finalize our traffic plan. The parade route is planned to be similar as it was for last year. The capacity for the route is set at 250 cars. We will strongly encourage students to carpool together. With the expansion of the outreach to high school administrative staff and school counselors at Jackson High, Archbishop Murphy, Cascade High School, Glacier Peak High School, and North Creek High School. For those students in Mill Creek attending those schools, there's a possibility that there will be very strong demand this year. However, in the preliminary metrics that we not only established last year, but have consulted with our team preliminarily, we're going to try really hard to hold at 250 cars. There are a number of human factors, engineering, traffic dynamics that factor into how long will a community stay at rest while all these cars are parading through. We think from our experience last year, we're peaking out at 250. So our concern is that with expanding the outreach, which we believe is what the will of council is, we may also need to similarly be firm in holding to that 250 car limit. A car count beyond that could result in really just impermissible and potentially unsafe delays at key intersections where people in traffic that did not, for various reasons, know that this parade was coming through, after a certain amount of time waiting at the traffic, may begin to engage in risky behavior to try and get around. Maybe they have an appointment, maybe there's some other emergency or something that is urgent in their lives that require them to break through the parade to get to where they need to go. So that's where we came up with that number. It's as much an art as it is a science, but we can ask for council's support in holding firm at that 250 car count.
City Manager?
Yes.
And just to be clear, my recollection is we didn't open it up to the high schools. It's just not limited to Jackson. It's focused on Mill Creek residents who are graduates of the high schools. So we do have residents that may attend North Creek or Archbishop, or so we're not opening it up to the high schools. We're just not limiting it to Jackson graduates.
Thank you for the clarification. Indeed, for the residents of Mill Creek who may have students that are graduating from those high schools, our concern is that the demand is going to peak above 250. So we're going to work really hard to encourage carpooling where possible. We will also be notifying community transit, the Chamber of Commerce, the Town Center Business Association, and other local businesses and owners along the route of possible traffic impacts. The Mill Creek Community Association and presidents of the HOAs will also be notified of the parade impacts. Finally, we've invited the fire department to attend the parade, and they're working to send this request through their approvals. One information of note is that unlike last year, Heatherwood Middle School will not be available to us for overflow parking. And it was not requested because the Mill Creek Little League has games scheduled on the baseball fields at that time. So there might be some challenge with overflow parking should that occur.
City Manager, guys, a quick question on it.
Yes, please.
I know last year the city purchased 2 banners, one out here outside of City Hall and one by the entrance to Mill Creek, congratulating graduates of 2020. Is that included in the budget for this year to do the same thing again this year, congratulating graduates of 2021?
That's a good suggestion. I'm not certain I have the short answer to the budget. It may have been donated. I'm not clear on that, but it's an excellent suggestion.
Looks like Kristen
Yes,
knows.
City Manager, thank you for the question. It was donated by the Mill Creek Chamber of Commerce, and I just heard back from Kevin Givney today that they would be willing to donate 2 banners again.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you to the chamber.
Yes, absolutely. Any other questions?
Is this also open to graduating college graduates like last year that live in Mill Creek? As we also opened it up to them as well. It was only a handful, but it was nice for any college students, which are none of them are getting a graduation ceremony. WSU, UW, any of those. They were allowed to join the parade last year. I think it'd be nice to allow them to come in. We only had not a lot. It definitely didn't impact the number of cars, but it'd be a nice thing to offer them if you could.
It's a really it's an interesting dynamic because certainly we don't want to preclude anyone from participating in these momentous achievements and milestones in their life, particularly since the virus. So again, the 250 car limit is something that we're orienting around. If they participated last year and the numbers were there, I would just say, let's see what the data provides in terms of enrollment. As you can imagine, it would be really, really hard to say no to somebody. And at what point are we shirking our duties to maintain a safe community by a program that seemingly goes on interminably? So it's really, let's see what we have in terms of registration numbers, see what we can do to consolidate cars. And it'd be hard to say no to a graduate of one of the local universities or any university that's part of the Mill Creek community. So it's a great question. Let's see what the data brings in, Councilman Steiger.
I had a question as well. To help alleviate some of the costs to the city and the human resources necessary, I know myself and I'm sure other council members or community members would like to volunteer to help with this. Is there a way we can go about doing so?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I realized that I missed a point here. We are working actually with a member of the community that spoke at the podium a couple of council meetings ago, offering to help. It's our expectation that this volunteer will work to coordinate the volunteers generally, and particularly with parent volunteers. We're looking to recruit 20 to 25 volunteers to be on site on the day of the parade and assist with other parade logistics. That invitation is certainly open to members of council. I know that we had members of council, Councilman Steckler last year, and others that I believe participated and volunteered. So this is, council is more than welcome. All hands on deck. It would be greatly appreciated.
All right, great. If you just let us know who to contact.
Okay.
I'm happy to do so.
We'll do that.
Thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. Adam, it's Tana Skolobowski that we just appointed to the Parks Board is heading up the volunteering, and she was talking about it at the Parks Board meeting. She's got a huge plan and lots of staging already lined up. So that's who we should make sure you have the contact information to get in touch with. And I had a question, City Manager, if they are using Heatherwood because there is a Little League game, are the parents going to be able to get to the Little League game if we're having our parade? Are we going to be out of their way in time?
That's a key logistical concern about how that will all work. Kristen, I don't know if we gathered the data on when the games are actually scheduled for Little League. in comparison to when the parade is starting, but we may need to communicate with the organizers of the Mill Creek Little League. Thank you for pointing that out, Mayor Pro Tem. We don't have the answer to your question right now. Joe, I just want to open up a little more of the discussion. Although I had slated Director Todd to talk about an update on the electronic recycling event, upon further reflection, what we are working to do is to be able to provide a report to council regarding the resources that we have dedicated to the parade after it's over and the other new initiatives this year. We want to talk about them generally rather than singling out one event or the other. Our goal then is for all of us to just be just more aware of the resources that we dedicated. If it relates to a proposed new initiative this year, or like the parade from last year, we just want to be more, I want to work to heighten all of our awareness and be more cognizant of the amount of time, resources that we're dedicating to these events this year. So with regard to the update in electronic recycling, we're going to defer the data grab on that for a more general discussion later on. The final bit of news I have actually has us hopefully opening up our passport offices as early as this coming Monday. There's a number of logistics that we need to work through, but right now, Laurel and Jody Gunderson are characterizing this as a soft opening. We are working to enable specialized equipment to be able to take passport photos. We've set up the photo booth in the back of the council chambers, as members in attendance tonight can observe. There's a challenge though in getting the equipment to work properly. Once we know whether that equipment is working properly, we will either have a soft opening that does not allow for passport photos beginning on Monday, or we will have a complete opening that will enable us to also do the photos. Unlike on demand, first come, first served, we are insisting upon an appointment only. We've set up that format and are promoting it roughly in 15-minute increments. And we're going to have 2 passport windows that we've slated to open. But we will also be firmly enforcing a mask requirement so that all stakeholders coming to their appointments for passports must wear their masks, or they will not be admitted and they may need to forfeit their appointment. If they appear into the building and then remove their mask, they will be asked politely to leave so that we can maintain a safe workplace. But that's the tentative plan, and we hope to be able to do a firm announcement once we cross a few T's and dot a few I's tomorrow, possibly Thursday at the very latest.
Michael, that's great news. One thing that came out of the mayor's meeting that I wasn't aware of, I didn't know that Sultan offered passport services. And the mayor did mention that they tried to open theirs recently and then had to shut it back down. So it's good to hear that we were finding a way to get back open.
Interesting. We may reach out to Sultan to learn more about their experience. It may be informative for us, but we're really working actually with those dates that we provided council to be able to open ahead of that schedule. So here we are. And I really can't thank the entire team enough for the hustle that went into that. It's remarkable in terms of how everyone worked together. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Police Chief Young. We're going to be talking about our first quarter statistics for this year, January, February, and March. There is a renewed emphasis on data and how the data informs our decisions, not only in the police department, throughout City Hall, but under Chief Young's leadership, we're staging up the first quarter's data for the council's consideration in tonight's report. It's available there for you to review. Chief Young may have some comments on it. And then Chief is going to speak to the North Sound Police Foundation, which I think is a new name that was previously known as Mill Creek's Police Foundation. Chief Young.
Yeah, thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, and guests of our meeting here. One of the things that we've been wanting to do with the police department since my arrival is start providing some sort of either monthly or quarterly statistics for your review. So I'm going to share my screen real quick and show you the numbers that we have So this is representative for January, February, and March of 2021. As you can see there, we are capturing what we believe to be the most important categories. And I'll be happy to entertain your questions on, what other categories you might like to see on there. I'm not going to go read everything to you, but what you can see over the last 3 months is that our calls for service, both dispatch through Snow 911 and officer initiated, have increased steadily. We were comparing a little bit to 2019 and 2020, and we're on par with 2019 at least. 2020 was a bit of an anomaly, but we are starting to see that steady increase in calls for service and workload demand. We are, again, doing a number of different things to try to maintain community safety, like some sort of traffic enforcement and traffic presence. We are still looking to participate in the Target Zero traffic enforcement program that is sponsored by the state. And we will add to these numbers as we need to, or as the council pleases. But I'll give you a moment to take a look at that, and then I'll entertain any questions you may have.
And Chief, speaking of traffic, the numbers that jumped out at me is January and March's number on traffic infractions are relatively consistent, but then we had a big drop by over half to almost 2/3 in February.
Yeah, you know what, Mayor, I don't have any answer for that right now. I'd have to look into it a little bit. It could just be that February is a little bit slower of a month. Not sure. I'll have to look into it, get back to you, sir.
Thanks.
Hey, Chief, I had a quick question. I've noticed an increase in graffiti in some of our parks. I see a line item here for malicious mischief and vandalism. Does that incorporate any graffiti on city property, or is that private vandalism?
That would include the graffiti on those particular properties, Councilmember Morgan. We can add a breakout if we need to. One of the issues that we're having with that is we don't see a whole lot of graffiti. So at this point in time, we just didn't feel it necessary to actually have that as part of a breakout category. But if you like, we can include that.
Oh, it's okay. I just wanted to know if it included it there.
Chief, is the line property in the third from bottom, is that property investigations?
The property in line, Mayor, is where we take some sort of property in from, some sort of a investigation or found property or something along those lines. And then we do whatever efforts we can to identify that owner and get it released to them as soon as possible.
So was January an anomalous month? I don't have the numbers before to compare if that is a spike or if it's a decline. That just jumped out at me. And similarly is the number on the very bottom line. Does that reflect a routine procedure that every few months these are sent out so that we're going to see that number high in particular months? Yeah,
Mr. Mayor, those numbers will flow. I'm not sure exactly what attribution we have for January, but what I can tell you is for the property destroyed, auctioned, or disposed of, that is one of the things where we were able to purge some of the items that we had in our property room through a partnership that we have with Edmonds PD. And then, of course, in March, we had the departure of our property evidence technician, which is why you see the stark drop in number there.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Steckler.
Yeah, I don't know why I don't get a nice yellow hand like everybody else. I got this weird little flesh covered hand and you can hardly see, but I did have a question for you, Chief. I was reading an article today about response times on police. Do we do a report on response times that you could share with us in the future?
Okay, so Councilmember Steckler, are you asking for average response time to calls? Is that what you're asking us to include?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, we can build that up. I'm gonna have to see how labor intensive that's gonna be, but we'll make every effort to include average response times to calls. I can tell you right now, our average response time is less than 4 minutes to a typical call for service within the city.
Which is very good. And it's something I'd like to have the public be made aware of. That's part of the reason for my question. I'd like to know what it is and share that with the public. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Bond.
Thank you, Mayor. Trying to turn this off while I'm thinking of it. Two things. Could you define what a canine development is, or is that just a misstatement for deployment?
Canine development would be the training that Officer Lerma and Police Service Dog Hondo participate in. Typically every Wednesday, they get together with East Snohomish County Regional canines, which includes the Sheriff's Department, Mukilteo, any of the agencies that actually have a canine, and they participate in training. So as part of the developments, they have different evolutions they do to either earn or maintain different statuses or certifications. So that's what those numbers are reflective of, sir.
Okay, maybe we could have a canine deployment box, you know, you actually attempted to track or something like that.
Okay.
Just a thought. And what's a FARO deployment? FARO.
Forgive me, Councilmember Bond, I don't remember exactly what FARO stands for, but what it is a device that we use for fatal collisions or serious injury collisions.
Gotcha. Okay. And one final question. Are we currently involved with drones? And if so, in what capacity?
Unfortunately, we are not currently involved in drones. That is something that I would love to have on our future wish list of things that we can use as part of our tool belt, whether it be for some of the different traffic accidents that we have, or different tracking, or some of the other vehicle operations that we might do. That's definitely something I'd like to explore with you in the future.
We've had some real success in drone applications recently, and I would be very much supporting us pursuing that. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, me too. We'll definitely look into it, sir.
Very good.
I'm sorry, are there any other questions?
Nope.
Okay. So with that, I can move into the North Sound Police Foundation. The North Sound Police Foundation, again, is another iteration of what was the Mill Creek Police Foundation. It began in about 2019, and then last year around August or so, it became the North Sound Police Foundation. The impetus of that was the Bothell officer that was killed over, I think in July of last year. So with that, some of the other smaller agencies decided that it may be a better idea to band together so you have strength in numbers. And part of what the North Sound Police Foundation does right now is they're collecting funds from different municipalities to be able to support fallen and seriously injured officers. I've had a number of different contacts with the Police Foundation. It seems to be a very good cause. Miss Sally Dagna is the chairman. Mr. Gabriel O is one of the members of the committee, and there's a whole bunch of other people that are involved in it, including Chief Mike Harden over in Lake Forest Park. One of the things that they have asked is for participating and partnering agencies to be able to use the shoulder patch of the different agencies on their website, not necessarily on the decal that they've created showing support. But if the council would be so inclined to allow that to happen, I will show you what the decal looks like. And then we can make a decision as to whether or not council would like to enable this to be used. So does anyone
Chief,
have
the only thing I worry about is there's a possible implication that there is an actual North Sound Police Department. You know what I mean, by creating a patch. So I don't know how that shakes out or was, but if it's just for like for the emblem piece of it, or for fundraising arms, I mean, as a logo, I don't know if I disagree or agree with it. I really don't have I remember the only reason I bring this up is I remember when this conversation started a couple of years ago. I think once we started putting these things, Michael brought up to us that there were taxing implications that come to the city, and that questions that needed to be answered once we start incorporating stuff like this. So I don't know if that's all been answered. City manager, I think, would probably have a better idea with this.
Chief, I think my suggestion would be for you and the city manager is to bring us back at a coming meeting, some information and a presentation on what the foundation is doing. I mean, we heard about it when it was being formed, but I'm not sure we've really been fully briefed on what it is it's doing, who's on the foundation, what's its mission. So I think for us to make an informed decision on this, we really need to understand what the foundation is about and what it's trying to accomplish. And so could you guys bring this back to us at a coming meeting and give us a presentation on the foundation?
You bet.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Chief, I spoke over you. Apologize.
No, that's good. Are there any further questions on anything?
No, thank you for giving us those statistics. I think that'll be interesting as we continue to have those. We can put together some graphs to show how those numbers track and vary so we can have a better understanding of what the numbers mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Our plan is to try to do a presentation on that at the last council meeting of every month. So that gives us time to iron out the little nuances that we have with all the different reports that may be coming in for the previous month. But we plan to do that every month, sir.
That'd be great. Thank you. Anything further?
No, sir. Thank you.
Concludes our report. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to audience communication. Would anyone like to speak to the council? Raise your hand, wave, put up your yellow hand. There's someone that's blocked on my screen by the host would like you to unmute, so I can't see the entire screen. Going once, anyone? Twice?
How?
Looks like Nick would like to speak. Nick Sweat.
Mr. Sweat, would you like to speak to the council?
Yes, I would. Nicholas
Name and
Sweat.
address, and please keep your comments to approximately 3 minutes.
Yes, Nicholas Sweat, 3023 138th Street Southeast, over by the Buffalo Farm. A couple of things for the multi-purpose. I would like to see like a multi-purpose community area over there built, something that everybody could use. Not just a big building that's used occasionally. Something that at least has some picnic area space would be nice in the nice shaded area. The only other thing I've had is the crosswalk over by the Jackson High School. I looked at it and I think that where it goes straight across there with just a couple of signs and some good paint to keep the people from parking around the corner would be sufficient. If you don't put anything there, people are going to walk across at that spot. If you put it down further, people are still going to walk across that spot. So you might as well have a crosswalk there so they have some kind of protection. And that's all I have.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Anyone else like, Mr. Nelson, is your hand going up?
No.
Okay, you're kind of raising it. Okay, anyone else? Okay, hearing none, we are going to, before we recess, we're going to go into executive session to discuss one item of potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110 subsection I, little 2. We will be in recess for 8 p.m. So we will do till 8:17 to give us a 2-minute bathroom break before we get started, and we will not be taking action at the end of the executive session. So with that, 4 of you will virtually appear in the executive session. 3 of us will physically appear momentarily.
I remember those days. Go to the special room.
Yeah.
It's been over a year.
Without objection, council has extended executive session until 8:22.
Can anyone speak?
Hello.
Oh, I'm sorry. I committed the Cardinals. Oh,
You're echoing.
Press mute on your laptop, Mayor, and then you can speak into the microphone in the council.
I am muted.
Yeah, I muted him.
Oh, that's what I did. I'm muted. I'm sorry. Try this again. Take two. We concluded our executive session at 8:22 on schedule, and I will now adjourn the meeting at 8:23 p.m. We'll see everyone in 2 weeks. Thank you.
All right.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good evening.